These are two images of Jesus of Nazareth. And if Jesus were the image on the right, would this impact your worship? Would this impact your faith? Would he still be King of Kings and Lord of Lords? Was Jesus real? Was he a white man? Was he a black man? I think the genealogy can give us some insight. These are some of the images of the Jesus that I grew up with. All three are historically inaccurate. And what amazes me is that people continue to circulate these images when we know it is impossible. It's impossible that Jesus had European features. Now, in my opinion, I think a good way in trying to determine his ethnicity, to find out what he looked like, is to look at the genealogy of Mary in the book of Luke. This is the genealogy of Mary in the book of Luke, chapter 3. And we can see the ancestors of Jesus in this text. The first thing I do want to say is I do believe that Jesus was a real person. But the name is questionable. And it's questionable because there was no letter J during biblical times. There was no J sound during biblical times. And most of these names are using the letter J. That J sound was a Y sound because there was no Yah. Yah is a German Yiddish sound. So let's get that out the way. And now let's take a look at the names. We're going to start with number 3, Seth. Seth is the name of an ancient African deity from premortal times. 28 is Ram. Ram is an African deity. So that is also associated to ancient Africa. And now we're going to take a look at number 57, Zerubbabel. There was no letter Z during biblical times. This is a translation. His name was more than likely Asara or Asarawa Babal. The Baba is an ancient African deity from premortal times. We're going to take a look at the name 13, Arathakad. This name should not be difficult to pronounce because ancient names were not difficult to pronounce. Arathakad. That is not a European name. So, we're taking a look again at these names. These are the ancestors of Mary and some the ancestors of Joseph. But these names are not European names. This is a good passage to explain why I did not use Joseph's genealogy in trying to look into the ethnicity of Jesus. And it's simply because Joseph is not Jesus' biological father. This text in itself states that there were some questions as to whether Joseph was Jesus' biological father. And it may have even troubled some people because you were supposed to be eligible to the throne through bloodline. And because Joseph was eligible to the throne and Jesus was not his biological son, Jesus was not eligible to the throne of David by blood. And honestly, there's so many people who say, oh, the Bible's a lie, made up. If the writers were trying to trick people and make people believe that Jesus was really royalty and entitled to the throne, they really could have left this part out. But they didn't. And it kind of throws a monkey wrench into the whole idea that Jesus was eligible to the throne by blood. He was not. Not through Joseph. The box on the left is Mary's genealogy. And this is the genealogy according to Luke. If we go to number 35, you're going to see the name David. That's King David. And under David is the name Nathan. That's at number 36. Nathan is the son of David. Well, one of his sons. And Nathan is a priest. Now, looking over to the box on the right, this is Joseph's genealogy. And you'll see David again on line 14. But on line 15, there's Solomon. Solomon is a king. And this is what makes Joseph entitled to the throne through David, because Solomon is the king, not Nathan. Nathan on the left is a priest, and that gives Mary, that makes her family in the line of priesthoods. On the right, this is Joseph, who is the heir to the throne of David. Now, here's the twist. Jesus was a legal heir to the throne by adoption, not by blood. These two passages show that the Bible states that Nathan was a son of David and Solomon was a son of David. We're all familiar with King David. We know that he was a king, and the Bible shows that Joseph came through his lineage. But Nathan is obscure. This is not the Nathan, the prophet, that interacted with David. This is Nathan the priest. And the Bible says that Nathan is a son of David. He was not some prophet. He was a high-ranking priest. That I am sure of. So, what it means is, Jesus is not entitled to the throne through Mary, the throne of David through Mary. Through Mary, he is entitled to a lineage through priesthood. The priesthood, not the king. The genealogy in Luke ends with Mary's father, Halah, or Halawa. He's number 75 on the list, and he seems to be related to the Hasmonean dynasty, as does Joseph. And there is a text that states that Joseph is the son of Heli, or Halawa, but it does not mean that he was his father. So, I think we can scratch off any thought that Joseph and Mary had the same father. The Maccabees, of whom he is related, are very important to the Bible, and I don't know why the book was removed from biblical text, but there should be a passage. If you have a good Bible, there should be a passage there. If you look at both genealogies and you read the Maccabees, you will see that the names are very similar. And why are they important? They are important because between the Old and New Testament, Judea became independent for about 100 years. And it was because of this family of priest kings. They were warriors. I don't know how Mary's father is related to this family, but when you look at this history, you will come across some names of Mary. And it will be up to you to determine if one of those Marys is the mother of Jesus. And if you do, look into it. Be prepared for some surprises. Now, Joseph is an heir through David, but Mary could be an heir because she's related to the Hasmoneans, as could Joseph. So that means Joseph would come through David and the Hasmoneans. But one thing to note about the Hasmoneans, who are also called the Maccabees, is that some people didn't feel they were legal heirs to the throne. Joseph was covered in both ways. Now, the family is complicated because you have a series of marriages, and you have to look at it to really understand what's going on here. I think it's worth the time. But as far as Jesus' ethnicity is concerned, these people considered themselves to be from the tribe of Judah. Of course, there was no letter J, so Judah would be called Wuda, Uwida, Wawada. It would definitely not be called Judah. And I personally believe that these people were of African descent. But with that said, this also makes Jesus real, because Jesus would then be, his history would still be a little complicated as far as his eligibility to the throne. Why? Because you've got the mother linked to an abolished dynasty. You have the father linked to an abolished dynasty. And the father is actually the biological, not the biological father. He is the adopted father. This is too much to be false. And if they wanted to make things easy and try to deceive people, they just would have wiped out all of this stuff. But you want to take a look at the Maccabees. They're very important. There were a lot of people who believed that Jesus was conceived by Immaculate Conception. But I want to say that this story was new for the Europeans. It was not new for ancient people. All we have to do is look at Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great claimed to come from a divine spirit, from God. And so most rulers said that their father was God. But where did they get that from? African mythology, African folklore. And in order to understand that, to understand why people claimed God was their father, especially rulers, we have to understand that the promise of salvation began in Africa through the prehistoric divine ruler who had no mother and no father. Hundreds and thousands of years before Jesus of Nazareth was born. This name is the Assyria or the Osiris. He had a few other names, but most books state that the promise of salvation for all mankind began with him. So, this story, again, was new for the Europeans, not new for any ancient people. If you want to decide, if you're going to research this Hasmonean dynasty, of which Mary belonged to, you're going to see a lot of Marys. And it's up to you to determine which one you think is Mary, the mother of Jesus. But be prepared for some surprises. And remember, salvation and the Immaculate Conception was new for Europeans. Having a spiritual father, not new. But it was new for the Europeans. What tribe did Mary, Jesus, and Joseph come from? It was Judah. And Judah is linked to the tribes of Africa. So we've come to the end of my commentary, and I have one question. If Jesus of Nazareth were living in today's time, what do you think he would look like? Would he look like a Macedonian Greek? Would he look like a person of East Asian origins, meaning pre-colonial India, Arabia, Afghanistan, Pakistan? Or would he look black, meaning African? I don't know, but one thing I am sure of, he had no European features, and he would never be identified as a European. Thank you for listening.